Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the channel. Hey, so I'm your host, behavioral scientist, social psychologist, Jordan Bridger. So, I'll throw you off, right? So, listen, I want to talk to you about something today, and that is, can language in and of itself help speed up your manifestations, okay? And there is a reason behind this. And that is because people are asking, are there any hacks? Are there any tips? Are there any ways to speed things up? So there is a kind of a mystical idea within scripture. And it's just found in the word agreement, right? But who's agreeing to what, and what is agreeing with another what, and all of this kind of stuff. So again, it's if two or more are gathered, right? There is Christ. Okay, and that is this biblical esoteric idea of agreement, okay? Now, it's a metaphor, obviously, right? It's a metaphor not just for me and somebody else agreeing in the world and kumbaya. It's actually talking about the inner self and the outer self. In fact, I find these terms better than the subconscious and conscious, because Neville actually later on really actually doesn't really get on board with the subconscious and the conscious, right? So the inner self and the outer self. This is the outer self. The inner self is the imagination, God, source, love, whatever you want to call it, right? The magnet. That's kind of a funny picture. But basically, things have to be in agreement, okay? So Neville talks about the inner conversations, which is really all about language in and of itself. And so the language has to be in agreement. That means, for example, if you're going out in this world and you're talking about yourself or other people, or you keep rehashing your experience that you had yesterday that you're trying to manifest or revise away, then all you're doing is you're impacting the manifestation, okay? So that's what we call paradox. And you don't want paradox when you're dealing with manifestation, okay? And yes, in this world, in the stage world, we get paradox because people believe in paradox. But within the self, internally speaking, when we're manifesting, paradox is not something that you want. You want things being in agreement. And that means the inner talking. That means the inner conversations, right? So for example, if you are wanting to manifest a large house or an SP to come to you or come back to you or whatever, right? Then what you want to do is you want to ensure that once you come out of that scene that you've created, or visualization, whatever word you want to call it, right? That your language in your mind and even outside is mirroring the new state, right? So when Neville talks about a technique called selective hearing, and I'm going to go into that in deeper detail as a separate YouTube, you have to also hear that he's not just talking about hearing. He's talking about all of the senses, right? And so how are you being like artistic in the way in which you are creating the life that you want? And so one way in which you can even become more artistic or expedite, even speed up your manifestations, is really being aware of what words you're choosing about your chosen topic of what you want to manifest. So for example, let's go back to this house. You want to manifest a big house, right? Okay, cool. No worries. But create the scene from the first person, yada, yada, yada. Then from there, ensure that you don't sit there and be like, oh my gosh, what if mortgage doesn't happen? What if we don't have enough income? Yeah, but we're in a housing crisis, right? And so you're constantly then looking to the outside world. You're looking to circumstances. And so what ends up happening, by the way, let's just talk about that for a second, because the imagination is all power. That's it, right? The imagination is the how and the when and so on, right? So what you're doing is you are ultimately going in and you are giving yourself that object of your desire now. You have it. You walk out of the imagination having it. That means your language now has to be in agreement with that new awareness, okay? So again, if you go out and in the world, you're just kind of going into the housing gossip of, oh my gosh, did you hear how many bad neighbors are in this particular area? And that's the area that you want to live in. Whatever it is, and you take that on board, that's going to actually end up aborting, as Neville says, your manifestation, okay? So the whole idea here is that you want to ensure that you are watching what you're mentally thinking, okay? Now, one thing I want to say, because I think this is not said enough, in these kinds of circles and manifestation circles. Does this mean that you need to police every thought and every emotion and every reaction? No, whatsoever. Do you understand that that would cause, and maybe has been, the source of many mental health issues, maybe even leading many people in these communities to depression, right? No. What this is about is the dominant thought, the dominant perception, the dominant state, right? The dominant beliefs that you're accepting and consenting to as true. Okay, that is your default. Okay, so Neville refers to that as your dwelling state. What is the state or the set of beliefs and emotions and values and perceptions that you're falling back on when you hear something, right? So example, if you want this big house and you turn on the news and everything's about it, some like looming like housing crisis, where does your mind go? That's really what this is all about. Okay, does your mind go, oh crap, things are going to fall apart, we're not going to get it, something else is going to follow through, and then you spiral, right? Or do you say, oh, you know what, my God is not of this world, my imagination will see me through anything, right? So my imagination is more powerful than any circumstance. So what you do is you learn to train yourself to ignore it. This takes time, by the way. You know, and that's another thing that I don't see talked about enough in these communities, because what sells is manifest your dreams in 4 minutes, right? And yes, can you manifest that quick? Of course, but to get to that point might take some time. And so you have to realize that and accept that as a part of this, right? And I get that that's not exciting to some people, because sometimes people come to manifestation when they're in a state of, oh, I need stuff done now, right? And then so what they do is they'll keep and continue manifesting through their original experience of, I need to be in this mode of rush and urgency and fear and all of this kind of stuff, right? And yes, you can manifest from all of those. You can manifest from anger. You can manifest from hatred. I mean, look at Hitler, right? You can manifest from any state that you want, or that actually not even want, that you're in. But wouldn't you rather, like, to me, it makes more sense that you would rather manifest from a state of like harmonious desire, okay? And I actually hate words like that. But what I'm trying to say is you should manifest from a state of, I want to manifest this. Like, and I don't need this, but it would be beautiful. And my life would be so much fun. And, you know, and this is a good test, meaning testing yourself as a manifester, right? So again, the inner conversations, by the way, are all about what you believe and how what you believe is being spoken out in your mind, okay? But it's also what's being spoken out in here, right? So, you know, words themselves are life or death. They're forms of life or death, according to scripture, right? And so, yes, the word itself is actually a metaphor for the imagination, but you have to understand that those words, they feed here, okay? So whereas the psychologist Sigmund Freud said really all of these come from the unconscious, it's the same idea. It's that basically you have created a blueprint for how you're going to see the world. And then you fall back on that blueprint, especially when you run into stress-based urgent scenarios, right? So you're like, oh crap, and then this is not going to happen, this is not going to happen, this is not going to happen, right? So my biggest tip to you is going to be from the field of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it's about modal operators, okay? So modal operators, I know it sounds kind of like matrixy, it kind of is, but it's this idea that we sometimes use these certain words. I have to, you must, you should, right? Everything, by the way, all of those are from lack, right? So even if you're saying you must do it this way, that's still lack, because you're saying there needs to be something done in a specific way for this to happen. And so then you're dependent upon the process, not the person, which is you, right? So never depend on the process, depend on the person, which is the new state, the future you that you want to become. So everything in here, the mental game, the inner conversations, everything that you're reacting to in here needs to be from the state of the wish fulfilled, needs to be from the belief that you already have it, needs to be from that you and the imagination combined together in agreement have already created what you want. And so you are essentially creating with your inner conversations. Can you create alone with just inner conversations and no visualization and no imaginary scenes? 100%. I've had several examples of myself doing that. And I know that a handful of clients have as well. So I want to encourage you to be very, very aware of the conversations that are going on in your mind, because language does frame our experience of reality, whether that be in here or out here. Whatever it is, be very active and proactive about what you're thinking. Neville even goes to the extreme point that he says, listen, if you start thinking a thought, or if you start feeling a feeling, or if you start having a scene of something in your mind, stop it. Like, immediately stop it, right? Do not sit there and say, I just need to finish this out, right? Have you ever done that? Like, where you like, oh, I've been right in the middle of this thought, and I'm like, okay, I just want to, or no, I'm reading this article on this one thing that I have a really hard time believing, and I need to finish it because I'm just OCD about it, right? Don't do it, right? Immediately stop things in your track. This is actually an act of self-care, because think about it. Who are you caring for? Well, you're enacting this self-care for the future self. You're actually caring for the person that you want to become. So inner conversations is a form of self-love. And again, this was an overview. I'm going to do a much deeper one, and we're going to even focus on the language and emotional side of this. But I hope this was helpful to you. Please share this with at least one person today. Subscribe if you haven't. Also, I have a private Discord group. Ask for that in the comments. Go check out all the other cool stuff that we're doing here at Wonder Emporium. So much love to you all. Thank you so much for your support. Much love.